Hello. Hello, everybody listening out there that's watching. Welcome to everybody who is joining the chat, coming in. It's good to see everybody. It is Monday, and well, I'm actually in a pretty good mood considering it's Monday. But shh, let's not discuss it like it might go away. I don't usually do Mondays very well. But I really, really wanted to finally get these three cases updated with everyone. There's been a lot of interest in these three cases, and I am speaking specifically in regards to Scientology cases. We followed the Danny Masterson trial here on this channel, and many of you in the chat and listening were there. We updated through the help of Tony Ortega, who's a journalist who was in the courtroom and has been promoting articles in doing journalism and reporting on Scientology for years. He and Chris Shelton gathered information, and many other YouTubers, all based on what happened in the court, and we were able to keep everybody updated. That was a mess through the original trial and then the retrial. And these cases have a lot of the same people involved. As we know, in the Danny Masterson trial, Leah Remini was there supporting Jane Doe 1 the whole time as an advocate, and she was in court often. And there was a lot of press about that. There were a lot of attacks from Scientology. There was a lot made of that. After the Masterson trial, Leah Remini filed her own lawsuit, and unsealed came the lawsuit that Jane Doe 1 filed against Scientology and others, and we'll get into that. But the one case that was stalled before the Masterson trial, and because of the Masterson trial, was the three Jane Does and several others, mainly Chrissy Bixler, who filed a lawsuit of harassment against the Church of Scientology in preventing them from filing against their accuser, Danny Masterson, and reporting the charges. And ongoing harassment since 2017, when they started to come forward and do police investigations and etc. That particular civil lawsuit. Now, these three are all civil lawsuits currently. Okay. Danny Masterson, well, that was a criminal trial we all went through. Well, that criminal trial took precedence over the civil lawsuit that Bixler filed along with her co-plaintiffs against the many defendants, including many aspects of the Church of Scientology, for harassment. Now, that got stayed during the process. Scientology had tried to get this civil case, the Bixler civil case, dismissed numerous times. The judge did not dismiss it, but he did stay the process, which means the clock stopped. And that'll become important when we talk about that individual case. But those are the three that we're going to discuss. There's a lot going on with Scientology all over the world. And rather than get into the nitty-gritty of it, I would just say that recently Tony Ortega was over in Paris for the opening of one of their new facilities there. And he had some interesting reporting on it. And he does do lively reporting in regards to what's going on in interviews. He has a YouTube channel, and he's got a blog on Substack that I have used links from before. And I'll be actually putting some links in the chat for some of his articles and stuff. A lot of the information coming in, I do not have a lot of the individual motions. I get as much as I can, but I do have copies of all the complaints for you all and the details, and I can tell you the status of where everything is. And I'm hoping that we can get through this without it being like, a 5-hour episode. We're not going to have a 5-hour episode. No, I'm not going to do that. I refuse to do that. Like, that's insane, right? Hey, look at the trees. You made the live. Oh, thank you so much for commenting on the videos, and I hope you're having a good day. Welcome, Grace. Yeah. So anybody that wants any of our members, and also if you're not a member, please also go right ahead and play anyway. But the bingo card is linked above the chat. It's a pinned link at the top there for the True Crime and Legal Update bingo card that Rocket Couch has put together for us. It's a little bit of fun. You can follow along with all of the kind of missteps I make occasionally and things that happen in true crime. In basically, there's a new contest for members, whether gifted or a continuous active, as long as you're an active member, and it doesn't matter if it was gifted to you or if you've just joined on your own. You can actually play this bingo card and you get a winner. You get a bingo. Send me by DM or email a picture and the date of that stream, and you'll be entered in a monthly contest for a surprise every month. It's a new member perk that Rocket Couch has helped me put together. We don't have a lot, except for if you are a member and you're not already in the Discord and you would like to be, and for some reason you haven't, I do put the link up once a month to members only that you can just join over there. We do game nights. There's a lot more detail on the cases that we follow as they happen before the updates, articles, videos, conversations that happen. We have game night. There's also a lot of creative people in there, a lot of people with like-mindedness on some of the shows that we do from all different communities. If you'd like to join. So if you're a membership and you haven't yet, send me a DM with your ID or a friend request, and if you have a different name, let me know. I won't disclose it in the Discord unless you want us to, but I do want you to get the perks of your membership. There aren't a lot of them currently, but I am working on it. So hey Beck, it's nice to see you. Hey Randy, it's nice to see you too. But if it's okay with you guys, let's get started. These are pretty involved cases. Okay. Here's our players. We've got 3 Jane Does. One of them we know absolutely is Chrissy Bixler. She uses her name. Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2 from the Masterson case. Jane Doe 1 has referred to herself as another name in the past, but because she filed as Jane Doe 1, and because Bixler is listing Jane Doe 2 as Jane Doe 2 in a lawsuit, I'm not using their names. Okay, until they make a filing with their name in it, I just feel more comfortable not using their names. Okay, some of us all know who they are because they told us on Twitter or Instagram, or there were articles, but I'm not comfortable repeating that information, knowing that they have filed these cases as Jane Does, listed as Jane Does. I hope that that makes sense to you guys, like where I'm coming from with that. Not everybody has to do that. That's just my way. Okay, it's what I'm comfortable with. Okay, so I'll be referring to them in that way. But the Jane Does 1 and 2 that we'll be referring to back and forth are the same Jane Does 1 and 2 from the Masterson trial. Okay, from that complaint and from that evidence and everything that we heard. So the stories are all the same. Okay, the first case that I want to talk about in regards to these Scientology lawsuits is Leah Remini. And I have 2 videos on Leah Remini already in her case. Some of this is going to be repetitive, but we're going to bring you back up to date on it. It was originally filed in August of 2023. The defendants in this particular case are David Miscavige, Church of Scientology International, and the Research Technology Center of Scientology. She amended that complaint in August 29th because of the amount of harassment she received from August 2nd when she made the filing. And that amended complaint was accepted. Okay. Now, I'm going to go over the causes of action here, like why she's filing this first case. Like, we don't call them charges because there's no indictment. This isn't criminal. This is all in the Superior Court of the state of California over in Los Angeles County. Okay. I have case files listed up here. Just to give you a heads up, those of you interested in the case files, Los Angeles County is a pay for records and documentation site. So you have to pay for each page. It's kind of like Pacer, but it's not in Pacer because of the civil suit. I have not found these cases publicly available through my Pacer account, but I can find them through the Los Angeles County Clerk, and that is a pay-for service. And those of you interested can contact me. I'll give you a link for how to get there. That's how I get the Manson filings and etc. This the same kind of situation. Well, here's the charges as they appeared in that Second Amendment: civil harassment, stalking, intentional infliction of emotional distress, torturous interference with contractual relationship. Now that's serious there. Intentional interference with prospective economic advantage, defamation and defamation per se, defamation by implication, false light, and declaratory judgment, California Code Civil Procedure. Let me explain number 9. That would be Leah Remini asking the judge in this case, okay, to look at the evidence she's presided and make a summary judgment, as we've seen handled in several other cases recently. When we discussed E. Jean Carroll versus Trump, and that Judge Kaplan made a summary. They already said that things had happened and they just had to do on the damages on the second trial. Remember, because there was a first trial and they had already said that he was guilty of this and that. Okay. They also, you can do that. They did it in the civil court on whether or not business procedures had been violated and code of conduct in regards to business law in New York was violated. Judge Engeron did the same thing. We're familiar with other cases that we have told you about, that this happens. They can do a summary judgment, and then the jury comes in and can either just decide the other points of a case, because he could do a summary judgment for just one part of it, one cause of action, and then the jury would only have to decide damages, or and on that point after hearing the evidence. In the fraud case in New York, there was so much evidence there that the jury did not have to say whether or not fraud was committed. They just had to decide on the damages, and they heard all the evidence because the evidence was so overwhelming to the judge when he looked at it. All of the codes of business laws had been violating and the statutes had been violating. It was well documented because of forensic accounting. When it comes to business law and things like that and fraud, the accounting on it and the forensic audit trail proved the facts, and it was just decided that that would be so labor intensive for 12 jurors to try to go through. But they did get to see it all anyway. They did hear about all of it. Okay. And it was taken into consideration. But the actual fraud transactions were actually listed as legitimate and that they happened. And so now it's just like, what's the penalty for it? So it's similar to that. But the reason that I'm mentioning it is because of the rest of the update. So here we go. All right. Now, since they, early in the case, of course, the Church of Scientology filed a motion to strike, and we've talked about this before. That was 1,000 pages. They also filed an anti-slap of another 30 pages. Okay, this was all the pushback that we talked about in video 2 that I did on this particular case. Now, since then, Mike Rinder and Claire Headley have filed affidavits because also the Religious Technical Center, they wanted to be removed from this case because if we look, she's suing David Miscavige, the Church of Scientology International, and the Religious Technology Center, all as individuals, because Scientology does separate all their little groups. It's all under one big umbrella, David Miscavige in Church of Scientology, and then they've got like the Celebrity Center, Scientology International, the Religious Technical Center, they got Sea Org. You all know these names, okay? We could do a chart on how everything's related, and I am kind of looking for something like that to put together for you to keep it straight. But in regards to the filings, the Religious Technology Center, they have a Scientology lawyer, of course, but it would be separate from the other parties. Like David Miscavige would have one representing him, and Scientology International have one representing him, and Religious Technology Center has another. But basically, they're all together. the parties for the Religious Technology Center filed a motion to be removed because they said they have nothing to do with all of this. They don't do anything like that. Leah Remini has not been a member of Scientology for X amount of years, blah, yada, 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 yada. However, Mike Rinder and Claire Headley, who both worked under the Religious Technology Center and others in regards to their fair game tactics. We all know the name Mike Rinder. He's got a YouTube channel out now here. He did the series with Leah Remini. He's been out of Scientology for a while. And when he was in Scientology, he was big Scientology. He, the nickname, what? He was in enforcement Scientology. Okay, so to speak, where they gathered information about people to use against them, to get them to do what they needed to do, just in case, and things like that. He's very familiar with fair game, and he worked the premise and the policies, and he was punished for it. And that's a whole nother story that you can check out on his YouTube channel, and his blogs, in his books. Well, he filed affidavits, and so did Claire Headley. And the Headleys have also been pushing against Scientology and have their own lawsuits. But they filed affidavits about Religious Technology's policies in regards to fair game, and that, yes, and when it comes to harassment lawsuits, they rightly should be listed. And they lost that motion, and they stayed. This judge, Randolph Hammock, who, by the way, if you'll remember, is the fourth judge that we've had for the Leah Remini case in just a year. Judges were removed because of associations, both parties, back and forth. Okay. One of them voluntarily stepped down because her husband had been a lawyer for Scientology. One, Leah Remini took an exception to because of the associations in other Scientology cases that they had in some rulings and addressings. And so, then we ended up with the third one, Judge Hammock. And, well, listen, after the Research Technology Center wanted to leave the case, Remini filed a detailed motion which addressed all the harassment, each incident that happened to her, with documentation from the social medias, conversations with other people, etc., etc. She told the whole story in 700 pages of documentation, and put that out. But because of the Church of Scientology's motion to strike and an anti-slap, the judge, Randolph Hammock, who he's very well-spoken, and he really seems to get it. He really does seem to get it. He takes his time. He does tentative rulings during the court, from what I understand from the way Tony Ortega has been talking about it in his blogs, that and then a couple of months later, they get finalized in the court, and he puts them up. There was a hearing in January in regards to these the motion to strike and the anti-slap, and Judge Randolph did actually he did make a tentative ruling in January, but it just became finalized in March. Okay, and he did actually remove some of Leah Remini's lawsuit. Now, the reporting back and forth on the social medias has been different, so to speak. When you read the ruling, he did take out a lot of the defamation and defamation per se. And everybody would say, well, gosh, have you seen the things they've been saying about Leah Remini? I mean, that's terrible. Well, Leah Remini did a whole series on them. And that's what I'd like to just bring up. And we've talked about this before. When you have defamation with public figures, it's different. It's a little different. They go at each other. They're both making money and doing things out in the public against each other. Not the harassment part. We're just talking about the statements that they make. The judge looked through all of Leah's supporting documentation in regards to the defamation, things that they said. And basically, I guess to put it simply, he said that you two can name call each other all you want. You're both doing damage to each other. This is not defamation. There's not enough here. This is the course of it. However, he left all the harassment stuff. The harassment is still there. Interference in the business claims is still there. All of that, interference, torsion, all of that is still there. Okay. but they took out the defamation part because, like, if they make horrible accusations. Leah Remini doesn't support her family. Leah Remini, did this, didn't visit her sick relative. Leah Remini supports violence. Like terrible things. There was a whole case where they said that Leah Remini incited someone into attacking an individual of Scientology based on some claims, which they've actually put in an affidavit to say they never even heard of Leah Remini. They don't know what they're talking about. But this was the articles that appeared on multiple websites that support Scientology, from multiple accounts in Instagram, social medias, Facebook, Twitter, like all over. So, Leah, of course, puts that into the lawsuit, but the judge is like, you know what? I don't want to get into the petty name calling stuff. Like, he didn't really use those words. Believe me, I'm extrapolating between what the actual court motion says and what Tony Ortega has been repulling. And the way that Judge Hammond looks at it is just that, that is not the crust of this anyway. Okay, that's not the meat of this case, so to speak. With so he wants to be fair and say, yes, Scientology, you have a point. Okay, you're allowed under free speech to say you don't like Leah Remini, just like Leah Remini is allowed to go and do a whole series about not liking what happened to her in Scientology, her experience with it, her information that she has personally from others who have gone through it. She's allowed to do that, right? So Scientology does get a little bit of play for that too. They're allowed to say, you just don't like us. You're doing hate speech against us. You have a targeted campaign against us, also. So in regards to the defamation, that all got struck. Okay. But that wasn't good enough for Scientology. Okay. Reporting from Scientology public relations and from their attorneys is like, oh yeah, the whole lawsuit is dead. Not so. There are 7 of the actual, let's go back, 7 of these. The civil harassment is still there. The stalking is still there. Intentional infliction of emotional distress is still being argued. Torturous interference with contractual relationship is still alive in this lawsuit. Intentional interference with prospective economic advantage is still alive. Number 6, it's limping. 1 or 2 of them survived, but not the rest. Most of the harassment survived. 1 or 2 was removed. Okay. False light. I think that's kind of, if it actually pertains to the defamation, then it's out. But number 9, the declaratory judgment that she requested, that's struck. He refuses to actually look at her filing and make a judgment. He wants it to go to trial. He wants, like civil. He wants, if they can't work it out themselves, to actually, go to trial and let a jury decide on what they're actually looking at here. So that number 9 was totally struck out. But in the meantime, that's not good enough for Scientology. Y'all know it, right? Like, there's like, okay, they got a couple of points. They got some of Leah Remini's case struck. Okay, Leah Remini can still come back. He didn't strike it permanently. She can, like, reformulate if there's something there that she'll be able to do. And she does have other things that she wants to add. More stuff keeps going on, and we'll get to that. Okay. But the Church of Scientology and David Miscavige are appealing. Okay. But not are they just not appealing the judge's motion, like they want it overturned. They went like, he doesn't know what he's doing. They now want to get rid of the judge. Okay. I kid you not. One ruling that didn't go their way, and they want to get rid of the judge. Ridiculous, right? I mean, they just, whatever they can do, muck up the works. All of this filing. Okay. And that brings me to another issue with David Miscavige. Okay. He refuses to accept service, even though they apply service everywhere in every building with the security guards, this, that, and other. He doesn't claim that he's personally served. Okay. This judge actually is saying verbally, he wanted Leah Remini in the attorney's the attorneys for both sides, plaintiffs and defendants, to get together and resolve this service issue. He said it's ridiculous. He said right out in court, Davis Miscavige needs to step up and become part of, like, if he wants to complain about this, like, he needs to come and answer his charges. He needs to come and accept service. And this is ridiculous, this hiding and being here and you're not here and you're not there. Nobody can prove where he actually lives. These are antiquated service laws. It comes into cases all the time, especially civilly, for being served. And the judge acknowledges that service is service. Your attorneys are answering. You need to answer this lawsuit. Okay, so we're waiting. We are waiting. And there's more on Miscavige service with the other judges. But this judge, Raymond Hammond, is not having it. He's like, he's made statements like, this is a pattern of behavior in all of his lawsuits, and it just cannot continue. It just cannot continue. So he's pushing on based on that. Okay. That's Judge Hammond. And I wanted to read to you some of the things that Judge Hammond has said. Okay. The tentative ruling, okay. He wrote that he was likely to dismiss most, but not all, of defamation claims against the church and leave most of the harassment claims more or less in place. Okay. He did not make his final ruling during that January. It was all tentative, but it has been filed now as of like March 16th, I do believe. Okay. The Church of Scientology spokesperson took that to mean that it was a resounding victory for the church in free speech. But now they want to get rid of him. Okay. Now they want to get rid of Judge Hammond, which, he's pushing back. He is definitely pushing back. There is no reason for him to be dismissed from this case. Okay. For those of you that want to actually get into the amended case, this is the copy of the filing that Deadline had posted. And that is a shareable Google link for it for this particular case. So you can go through all of those. Leah Remini on her Substack and through other postings had posted her 700-page documentation filing also. That's a pretty big file to start flying around. So if people want it, I can lead you to it and I can get it for you. Just get in contact with me. Hello, Mrs. Cassandra, Mousy, Jean. It's nice to see you. I'm kind of like talking away up here and not actually following the chat very, very well. So if you do have a question in regards to this particular case with Leah Remini, please just use the @ for my name so I see it come up in the chat, okay? I'd appreciate that. It would help me keep track of the questions, And for those of you coming in, the bingo call, it's linked up above if you'd like to play. So, all right. So with Judge Hammond, let me just... He said, I want to get this. I have so many articles up here. Okay. Judge Hammond is like, not so fast, David Miscavige and Scientology. All right. We usually have preemptive challenges that you can have with judges. That's what Leah did in this case with the first judge. Okay. When it went to William Fauci, he went, and then it went to Judge Barbara Shepard. Well, Judge Shepard actually recused herself, like I said, because her husband had worked for Scientology. So Judge Hammack, I said fourth, but he's the third. We're looking at possibly a fourth. I think that's how it got in my head. But Randolph Hammack has been handling it since Barbara Shepard has stepped down. All right. He made that tentative ruling, which got finalized in March. And David Miscavige had much displeasure about it from the reporting. And he has now filed his own peremptory challenge to have Judge Hammack removed. Okay. Scientology attorney William Foreman then filed notice that the church planned to appeal the ruling that he made also. But rather than simply step down, Judge Hammond is pushing back. He said he's wondering if it's actually too late for Miscavige, especially on his own, to remove the judge so easily, since he's already made rulings and they're already filing motions. He's got a valid point. Yesterday, he filed a rather unusual order in the, not yesterday, this day. I'm sorry, I said the word yesterday, but it was actually in the beginning of April. Oh, it was not yesterday. It was like a week ago. He filed an order asking both sides to submit arguments about whether at this point in a lawsuit, after a judge's major ruling, one party can unilaterally remove the judge. Okay. He proposed that both sides wrestle with these particular questions. And I'm going to read them to you. It's a little boring, but it will show you where this judge is coming from. And I want to focus on this judge because this is some glimmer of hope that we've got some reasonableness in dealing with Scientology and this kind of harassment that's been going on. Because let's be honest, the course of Leah Remini's lawsuit is that Scientology is a huge bully and they affect people's lives and they are relentless about it. And it's pretty much illegal, half the stuff that they do. But they use so many members and people in such an effort that it's hard to actually get charges against them for it. And it needs to stop. And it needs to have a light shined on it. And this is what Leah Remini's lawsuit is helping to do. Okay, so the judge says, the fact that this court has already ruled on a special motion to strike in the anti-SLAPP, which may involve contested fact determinations relating to the merits of the trial, does that prevent defendant Miscavige from preemptory challenge in this time? Does the fact that defendant Miscavige is the de facto leader and or CEO of corporate defendants prevent him from filing this peremptory challenge on his own in an individual capacity? Does the fact that he sought relief in his individual capacity by filing a motion to squash for this court to hear prevent his current peremptory challenge at this time? In other words, you petitioned me to do what you want. You can't peremptory challenge me off. No. Peremptory challenges before everything really gets started. It means that you don't actually have to list a cause or a reason. You just say, like, no, I want a different judge. It's just been assigned and we're moving. Remember that once everything starts going with the judge, like you need cause to strike things, you need cause to move things, you need cause to appeal things. Peremptory challenge is something that happens before the case is like actively doing motions and filing. Okay, they can file the first complaint and he can answer the first complaint. But once a judge starts ruling on this stuff, it's go time. And peremptory challenges are usually done during go time, so to speak. So, like, this judge is clever. He's laying it out to them. And it was nice to see that he just didn't walk away. Because believe me, most judges would, because dealing with a Scientology case, and this is just speculation on my part, but I'm just thinking, in my humble opinion, the amount of trees that this organization kills on a regular basis with lawsuits in just the filings and monotonous stuff, thousands and thousands of pages. The answer to this one was 1,000 pages. 1,000 pages of why Leah Remini shouldn't sue them. Well, anyway, does the fact that subsequent to the filing of the peremptory challenge, he filed a joint stipulation for this court's signature in order on March 29th. Oh, but on April 3rd, he doesn't want the judge to exist, but his lawyer and his name appear on the joint filing, requesting an extension for his time to file a responsive pleading and affect his right to exercise a peremptory challenge. Does it? Does it? Like, do you get your cake and eat it too, Mr. Miscavige? Like, no, no. You can't have it both ways. This judge is clever. Does the subsequent filing of a notice of appeal by the corporate defendants in regards to this court's ruling of the special motion to strike have any impact on the pending peremptory challenge, either jurisdictionally or otherwise. His main point is you can't be in charge of this whole thing and then act like you're on an island somewhere and you don't want no part of it. But then, yeah, you want to come in and say that I can't be the judge. Yay. Thank you for calling it like you see it, Judge Hammond. I mean, hey, I had a big grin on my face when I was reading. I snickered a bit reading all of this, and I'm sure, like, you can see it in the writing of Tony Ortega as he was writing it also, like he was putting it out there. Okay. It was humorous. We're really curious to see where this goes, but that is where we're at with Leah Remini's particular portion of this case. Okay. Hi, David Miscavige. I really want to know what you got to say about Judge Hammond now. You're not going to be able to get rid of him so easy. I think perhaps it seems reasonable to me, especially if the judge wants to actually appeal, or Leah Remini actually files for an appeal on this. Okay. If it goes up to the LA, the Supreme Court for the state, he may have to prove cause, and I don't like the way he ruled is actually cause. He didn't gut her lawsuit enough for me. Like, it still exists and I want you gone. Basically that's kind of the gist I get from what's going on here. And it's their right to complain. I mean, we got two sides of the story here. It's their right to say, like, hey, I think something's going on here. And I'm sure doing their due diligence, they will actually pull everything out to try to get rid of this lawsuit. Of course, it's a civil suit. What do you want to do? You don't even want to get to trial. You want it gone. You want to settle, or you want it gone. It's just a pain in the neck, civil suits. And I get that. And that's usually what happens. They usually disappear, right? They get settled. They get tore apart. They don't normally, a lot of them don't go to trial, although we've seen quite a few of them lately. All right. So the next one, oops, hold on. Oh, sorry. That would be a tech issue, right? Bixler. Nope. Jane Doe. Sorry. Jane Doe number 1 is the next one. This lawsuit, let me give you the copy in the chart. Here is the complaint. This one's a little heartbreaking for me, but anyway, I'm going to check before we I'll bring this down for a second, and I'm going to check the chat for questions before we head on to actually Jane Doe number 1's lawsuit. But for Leah Remini. Hi, Mrs. Cassandra. I'm just looking to see. Oh, I do see a tag here, but it's not a question. But damn, that's really nice of you to say, Rocket Couch. I think that means, like, if I put this up, that means that somebody stroked the bear. Somebody said something nice about me in the chat. That means that's a bingo there. Like, that's a bingo slot, that you should. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. And the courts have known this for years. Yes, you mean, Jen, I assume you mean about him running away from service, in how service is just like these antiquated laws. Like, there needs to be something about it, Yeah. I'll know it's not a verdict, but I'm going to count the judge saying this as good ending. You know what it is? It's hopeful. I would say so. Something good happened in a legal filing, like comments from a judge that were reasonable, and I like it. It makes me feel warm inside, so I say it counts. Thanks. I do too. I say it counts too, Rocky Couch. No, well, Mark, I mean, in the legal system, in regards to motions, you can't actually file one way and then act like nothing started. You can't actually, like, file motions and be all active in the process, and then to act like, oh well, let's just go back to day one and let's just get them going. No, like, yeah, but I get it, and I like that you got a good sense of humor about it. Mm-hmm. All right, but am I good at doing the crime? I must be, I guess, because I don't know of any crimes, and neither do you, that I have committed. So if I have, I was good enough to get away with it so far. Hmm. Considering one of the squares on the bingo card isn't supposed to be there, we haven't decided whether to include it or not. I'd count tech issues anyway. I would count tech issues anyway. And I sent you a DM in Discord Rocket Couch last night in the middle of the night. I was up. So we could talk. Yeah. Oh no, the harassment from the Church of Science. Oh, that's what you meant, Jean. The courts do know it. They have the filings. They see all that they file and how they go after them, how they actually go after them in the filings themselves is extraordinary. Like, it's vicious. It literally is. How they don't see it as a terrible organization, which we're going to get to some other comments about that. But let's do, if you don't have any more questions in regards to Leah Remini. Basically, we're waiting on the judge. We're waiting to see if the judge gets removed. Okay. And we're waiting to see if additional harassment amendments of Leah Remini's get put in there. If she can file more. Basically, the judge, I will say this, George Raymond Hammond, in regards to the Leah Remini case, he doesn't want a whole bunch of filings going back and forth. He has said repeatedly to both sides, if there are things that you can work out, work them out. There's no need to have these 1,000 pages. Like, you make, he doesn't want to get cranky. Don't give him so much to do. And now he's giving them something to do. He's like, talk about this. I want to know where this, like, remove me. I'm pushing back. I don't think there's any reason to remove me here. This doesn't seem copacetic to me. Like, let's go through that. So he's pushed it back on both parties. And what that does is give Leah Remini and her attorneys the opportunity to submit a response as requested by the judge to those questions, and to cite legal cases to where this shouldn't happen, David Miscavige. It's a very clever way to not get it overturned, because they're going to both sides are going to cite law in precedent and why it should. And then the judge just has to match up the two and say, nope, this is my judge decision. Nope, I'm staying, and you can just, like, deal with it or not, like, depending on where he sees the precedent in the legal issue. But it prevents him and his law clerk from weeks and weeks of, like, research and all this other stuff. He's like, oh, that's what you want to do? Okay, answer these questions. Like, let's figure this out. Put it all back on them. Hey, it might as well be productive. If you're going to be spending their time sending in thousands of pages of lawsuits, it might be something that he could use. Very directive. I find him to be quite clever and quite the statement's quite charming. It was pretty unique. Okay. It is interesting to watch the different news organizations and how everything gets reported. Some say it was a Scientology big win, and if it was a big win, why are they trying to appeal it? And if it was a big win, why are they trying to get rid of the judge? He seems reasonable. I think they're upset because they couldn't get the Religious Technology Center removed. They remained a defendant in this, which means their records are available for the court. Let's be honest, okay? The reason they want the Religious Technology Center out from all of these lawsuits when they get mentioned is a lot of the documentation, records, and things that can support the accusations that are being made are filed there. If they're not part of the case, you see what I mean? It just seems clever to me. They are, based on the affidavits of Mike Rinder and Claire Headley, they said that that Scientology subsidiary, the Religious Technology Center, is chaired by David Miscavige and proves directly that David Miscavige understands what is happening under religious under that organization in regards to the harassment campaigns of former Scientologists and the policies there for fair game. So it's huge that they kept them in. I mean, I don't want to make light that that was a small thing. It's actually quite huge because it ties fair game, David Miscavige, and the harassment all together. And previously in other lawsuits have failed because David Miscavige was able to remove himself from that situation. Okay. No, those are other people doing it. I'm not responsible. Just because they're a Scientologist doesn't mean, like, we have no policy about that. But now the policies can come under consideration with that organization still being named. The other thing that's really, really important, don't want to let slide, is that the interference with Leah's business contracts, namely the Auto Bloom, iHeart, and the Game Show Network things that Scientology interfered with and messed up for her. That's also really important because that's all clearly documented through third parties, the negotiations and what happened. And you've got uninterested third parties on the outside able to provide evidence and testimony as to what Scientology actually did. And also, the actual malice portion of defamation is still in play for defamation. The judge said, based on the actions that are taken or accused, that Leah did prove that there was a concerted effort here against her, which proved malice, and the judge confirmed it. He said that she did sufficiently prove that there was malice in the defamation. Okay. He said it was common sense. Yes, he said the words common sense in his actual order, that there was malice in Scientology's unrelenting attacks. That's going to play well for the harassment part of this case. And it also, you need the malice intent for any part of the defamation that survives this particular suit. Okay. So civil harassment remains, stalking remains. But actually, the stalking needs to be redocumented because a lot of the stalking was in the defamation. So he did ask that it be repled. In other words, that's part of the reamendment that she's sending in. Intentional infliction of emotional distress remains. Tortious interference remains. Intentional interference with prospective economic advantage remains. A lot of the defamation in 6 and 7 were stricken. And in false light, a lot of that was stricken. But number 9, declaratory judgment, was stricken altogether. So, I mean, they use the term gutted. I don't know. Do you guys think that's gutted? I don't know. I don't actually think that's gutted. Hey, Wrecker. Good to see you. Anyway, if there's no more questions, we'll go on to Jane Doe 2 then. Let me bring that back up. Jane Doe 1. Okay. This complaint was filed in June of 2023 and it was unsealed in December. Remember, this was post Danny Masterson trial. Jane Doe 1 was in the Danny Masterson trial. Now, the accusations of this actual case. Oh, I got the wrong one up. There we go. The defendants in this case are the Religious Technology Center again, Church of Scientology International, Gavin Potter, who's a recruiter for Scientology, a pretty famous one, David Miscavige himself, and Bridge Publications, along with those 1 through 100 who aided and abetted in what this went on. Judge Robert Broadbelt III is the judge in this particular case. Now, this case is a little difficult to talk about because it's a subject that comes up in the Masterson trial again. And, well, you'd think I'd be used to it now, but I'd still have difficulty saying the words in, going through the motions. But anyway, the accusations of this case include grooming at the age of 16. Basically, Jane Doe was 16. Jane Doe 1 has been in Scientology. She comes from a Scientology family. She became active in it like when she was like 14. So Gavin Potter actually started recruiting her for Sea Org. Okay. And when it was discovered, because she says that he forced himself. Now, if you'll remember in the testimony of Danny Masterson, Jane Doe 1 had said that she was a prior victim of unconsensual assault and that it happened at a certain time. And she was talking about this incident with Gavin Potter, who was recruiting her for Sea Org, spending a lot of time with her, asking her for rides home. They were at a party somewhere off to the side under a stairwell or stairs. I don't remember exactly point for point, but it's in the case that I dropped. He did it against her will. She didn't know what to do. She reported it to Scientology. Okay. And their answer, of course, was, well, there's no canoodling between Sea Org members. You can't do that. You're either going to get married, the two of you, at the age of 16, which, by the way, is illegal in California. You have to be 18, the age of consent, or 16. All right. Forced to marry, or you're going to get 5 years of, food deprivation, extra work hours, some type of punishment. It was pretty laid out. They got married. Okay. They got married in Las Vegas. All right. In this particular case, because they're trying to say that Jane Doe 1 was under contract and could not report anything and cannot file against them. She has to go through arbitration. And that is a very strategic and often used in almost every case with Scientology. You can't sue us. You were part of the church. It's in your contract. You just can't do it. You can't report on us. You can't do this. You can't do that. You got to go to arbitration. We're going to settle it in-house. You don't get to use the laws of the country in which you live in. You're not entitled to that as far as they feel based on the contract. Okay. But they've got a little bit of a problem here with this one. First of all, she may have signed on for Sea Org, but she never signed a lifelong contract. She says that lifelong contract was put to her after the fact when she wanted to attend something with Lisa Marie Presley, and they said to go inside to the building and be there, she had to sign this thing, which she did. And they went all the way back and found a 2002 copy of a contract that they say she signed. The only problem is no one from the church signed it. And then she has a copy of one where someone from the church signed it, but she didn't. So there's no contract with dual signatures on it. But besides that, they got another issue. Scientology has filed motions that Jane Doe 1 has changed her story. She either signed it or she didn't. She either did it under pressure or it doesn't exist. She said during the trial that she did not recall signing a lifelong agreement. Okay. And now she's saying that the reason she didn't recall signing this lifelong agreement is because at the time she thought it was actually something else. She was in the middle of doing something with Lisa Marie Presley to attend an event, and for all she knew, it was some kind of special thing in regards to the event. It's not necessarily that she's lying or misleading. The story can change with additional information. To me, it sounds like additional information added to the testimony that she gave in the trial. I don't really think she meant to mislead, but that's not the angle Scientology is going to take, of course. But they got bigger issues because in 2022, there was legislation enacted that is here to protect situations like this. Okay. The EFAA actually stands for Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment. Okay. Now, this is an issue because, well, her lawsuit came after it was filed. I do believe this got enacted in March of 2022, and her lawsuit came afterwards. So she started following it in December of 2023, and it became, public June of 2023. Okay. What it actually does is say you can't force arbitration contracts when there is sexual assault or sexual harassment. That it's going to be an automatic exclusion from any argument like that. Okay. Scientology is now saying that she cannot go forward because of the contract, and that this shouldn't apply because at the time she signed the contract, the law wasn't here. But the law affects trials now. It affects cases now, not the incident of what happened, but actually the prosecution or the actual complaint of an issue that happened. That date is what matters on here. As far as what I'm reading legally, like back and forth going on. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand the nitty gritty of it, but a little bit of common sense here. You can't actually say, well, if you make a new law now, it doesn't apply to anything I did in the past because, well, you know, depending on what it is, okay, you know, just silly example. If we when it comes to contracts, it gets different than actually trying to hold somebody accountable for a new law for something that happened in the past. The point is that the law was in effect when she filed her lawsuit. And so that is going to be the cross of the argument between the court and Scientology, you know, between the lawyers for Jane Doe and the plaintiffs. They're going to wrestle with it, and there still hasn't been a firm judgment on this. Okay, now the judge for this case, Robert Broadbelt, has actually done actually when it came to service in regards to here, actually told Jane Doe 1 and her attorneys that even though they served every single building known to occupy David Miscavige, they hadn't done enough. Yeah, he technically wasn't served. And they went back and forth about this. And they're still going back and forth about that. They actually told her to go back to the drawing board and keep serving him. And yet in other cases where they were served in exactly the same places, for example, the Bixler case, that judge rendered that service was done. Okay. But and it's the same facts, the same places. Okay, what does that say? Okay, well, they actually ruled that they had to go back to the drawing board. Now everybody's concerned because they think David Miscavige may have a leg up. He's got this particular filing to plead as precedent. Okay, remember that. Like once a judge does an order, precedent starts. Like there you go. Well, he said, well, hey, they served me in all these places, and he said it wasn't good enough. So how come that judge gets to say it is good enough? Like, you know, it gives them a little bit more leverage, you know. Exactly, Mark. Mark, I just saw your comment now about this, and that's important. I want to grab that and put that up. A contract signed by a minor is invalid. You would think so, except for Scientology has them sign them in 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old and tries to enforce this. When you get to regular contract law, that makes sense to me, right, Mark? Like you would think it shouldn't even be a thing. Okay. You would think that a contract, you know, here's the other thing. A contract can't be enforced that actually has you breaking the law. When they say that they can't go to law enforcement to report members when a crime has been committed, that's interfering with the law. And that's where most of the judicial system is having such an issue with Scientology in this arbitration stuff, in the rules that they try to put up on it, you know. Indentured servitude, exactly. And there are lawsuits, Grace, going on about child labor also. Like some of them got dismissed based on timely filing. These were adults in their 30s who went back and were suing Scientology because they were made to work unrelentlessly ridiculous hours, more than 10 to 12 hours a day. And the room and board they received in the minuscule payment didn't even equate to minimum wage. Like it was below. So they actually were trying to sue them under child labor laws in the state. Okay. So there was a bunch of problems with that case. That's something we could talk about at a later date, but it's an ongoing problem with Scientology. They don't really care about the fact that a billion years doesn't exist, that it's hard to enforce, that they're asking people like to go against the law, that they're that they're trying to say that you don't have the right to what everybody else does in America because you've got to follow their rules, you know, like they're interfering with the legal system. They as if they're above the law. And you know how I feel about that. This whole organization. Anyway, this judge, yeah, $47 a week, Grace reminds me. Yup. So you know the lawsuit I'm talking about is like, yeah, You know which one of them. That was also civil. You know, what they need to do is to get enough evidence so that some of this stuff can be more than civil. Just in case I didn't, I do see that I highlighted it, so I think I did copy and give you the link to the Bixler, not the Bixler, but the Jane Doe 1 lawsuit. There's that one too. That's a shareable link. Hi, Jasper. Good to see you. Welcome. Welcome. Oh, you do? Yes. Oh, and the protesters. That's right, Grace. I do know you follow him. I'm sure he's got a lot to say about these lawsuits too. Okay. Well, anyway, you know, Scientology is denying that this new law will prevent Jane Doe from being forced into arbitration. They are clearly saying, you know, that they're going to do what they normally do. They force these lawsuits out of court and into religious arbitration repeatedly. This is how Scientology has been able to save face for years. They just keep everything from going through the court system. But Jane Doe says she was forced as a minor into this marriage. And the reason that she was forced into the marriage was to cover up sexual assault, which makes this law very pertinent. Okay. Congress passed that law for a case just like this. Just like this. Just take all the names out. And this is why they made this law. Because religious organizations were saying they could do what they wanted. Okay, sexual assault, sexual harassment, minors, whatever. And because of their contracts and their religious contracts with them, they weren't allowed to go to law enforcement, and they had to go to religious arbitration first and have it dealt within the system first. Okay. And they're saying that she needs to go to religious arbitration. This law says she can't be forced to do that. Okay. Well, Scientology did bring up that agreement that Jane Doe signed in 2002. And when she made a visit to Flagland Base in Florida, okay, she explained in court declarations that she'd gone there to visit with her mother and spend time with Lisa Marie Presley, who was a Scientologist also at the time. Okay. She said that she had been told she had to sign an agreement just to remain where she was because it was an official Scientology building and event. And that she had no intention of the time to engage in religious services. But Scientology is pushing back and saying since she married Gavin Potter, she's been part of Scientology, so she's been benefiting from religious services all along. Well, the story goes that although they got married when she was 16, she became pregnant at 19. She did not live with Gavin Potter. She went home and lived with her mother. She said he continued to assault her periodically in between, and at 19, she became pregnant, at which time he insisted that she terminate the pregnancy because under the Sea Org that they both worked, she was a secretarial type position there, okay, like a receptionist. And under the Sea Org, it was deemed under Miscavige, under David Miscavige's ruling in Scientology. He made a formal declaration that Sea Org members cannot have children. You can't canoodle unless you're married with a, if you're a Sea Org member, and you cannot have children. It interferes with your duties. You could not be part of Sea Org. Okay. So after that, she started to leave Scientology, and she became completely out of it, I guess, the year before, like she went charges. And I remember in Jane Doe 1, during the Masterson trial, her mother was the one that was still involved in Scientology. And this is Leah Remini supported Jane Doe 1 so much. She's the one that had a victim's advocate. She has a lot of support because her own family has disowned, like everybody has disowned her, because she walked away from the church based on that. Remember, she was born into Scientology. She became active at a very young age. But wrong has been done to her. But in order not to shine a bad light on Scientology, all of her friends and family have turned from her because she's not allowed to speak about what was done to her, or that anything is wrong with Scientology, or that they might do anything wrong at all. And so she does have a lot of support out here from other survivors from after they have left the church. Other ex-Scientologists, Leah Remini being a prominent one. She was in court every day. She had a victim advocate. She's also the one that had the special attorney there because of this kind of charges and things that had happened to her, protecting her rights of anonymity, of harassment, of all of it during the trial, of the Masterson trial. And so, to say that she was just benefiting from the religious services while she's trying to avoid all of this from happening to her, it's quite the tale. In Scientology often uses this against everyone. They say, well, you were here for 10, 20 years and it was fine then. But you're only complaining now because you left the church and we don't want you and we don't want anything to do with you. You're a bad person. Everything was fine. Well, it wasn't. It was impossible to leave. Your whole family, your whole life. Remember what Scientology requires from their members. A billion-year contract. Everything you live and breathe and earn. If they tell you not to talk to a member of your family, your own husband, you need to shun him. If they become a suppressive person, out. All right. If you do anything wrong, even including trying to say that some wrong was done to you, you've got to go through extensive retraining and all of this stuff where they will just go through everything to convince you it's all you. Everything that bad that happens to you is you. Everything is all you. Nobody did anything to you. What did you do in the past? And what are you subverting from us that you would be in this position? These are the kind of things they say to them, Being told that you're not assaulted because it doesn't exist in their culture is really offensive. Well, she's in a very tough and it's going to be interesting to see where the ruling goes with this particular judge. This is a tough judge on here. And he's kind of no nonsense. He's very black and white about the politics and about the actual contracts and stuff. And he's reading everything carefully, but they haven't come forward on a ruling on this yet. Okay. Scientology is hitting back on the arguments that they should be able to use this law to cancel any kind of legal or religious arbitration between the two parties. They say that the plaintiff has submitted a declaration to evade application of her ambiguous assent to arbitration. In other words, she keeps avoiding this. She just makes all these declarations, and we're going to nitpick each word in these declarations because we just say there's a contract here, and she just keeps changing her story. Okay. They say that this story about being pressured to sign an agreement because she was going to attend a birthday party for Lisa Marie Presley. They're saying that she could not have attended any Scientology event unless a contract was in place, and they also brought into light that 3 years ago, when Bixler and the Jane Does filed their civil complaint in 2019, she swore under penalty of perjury that she had no recollection of ever filling out, seeing, initialing, or signing that agreement. Okay. She didn't say she didn't sign anything. I mean, let's just be clear. But, they're saying that this is all a new narrative and she's trying to use all of this by saying that it doesn't she didn't even sign it. And now she's trying to use a law that prevents that even if she did sign it, wouldn't be in effect. And they're trying to say, that the McGill rule is inapplicable to her as her agreement does not bar public injunction relief. That the challenge is claiming a lack of mutuality contradicts clear authority and finds that similar arbitration language has been successful in the past. And her claim that there was no procedures in Scientology arbitration rests purely on speculation. Because she's also saying that you can force me into religious arbitration, but it doesn't take away what happened. There's no resolution that I was sexually assaulted. at the age of 16, and that you forced me to marry Gavin Potter or be punished, that you used unethical tactics to get me to do what you wanted. Okay. And Scientology is like, we don't care what happened. The agreement needs to be enforced. Because here's how arbitration works. Like, we told you had to get married and you got married. Like, and that's what they want to do now. They want to actually get her into arbitration to prove that there is no lawsuit here and that she should just drop everything. And that if they handle it internally, they can come back to court then again and say it's moot. Okay. Well, President Biden signed that EFFA because this happens too much. Okay. There was a Fox News anchor. I believe the last name was Carlson. No, not that Carlson. This was a woman. I think her name was Gretchen. Gretchen Carlson. Okay. And she was very instrumental in lobbying for this legislation. And she certainly did come out and specifically mention Scientology and the case with Danny Masterson and how those victims were forced into arbitration as an example of the kind of injustice. That's why this law is necessary. That the reason that the Danny Masterson case took so long to come forward was because they weren't even allowed to report their crimes to law enforcement. Okay. Fortunately, that case was actually overturned. It was forced into arbitration originally, and this is part of the delay, but it was later overturned by an appeals court that the arbitration should not in this kind of a situation, because they were prevented from filing claims. They were told that between a male and a woman in Scientology, the word rape doesn't exist. If you're in a relationship, if you are with them, they do what they say. Like, he's above you. You have to do whatever. This really turned the legal system on the ear here. President Biden doesn't agree. Obviously, he signed it. And I applaud Gretchen Carlson for actually speaking out and using particulars. And she did use that particular case. Okay. The legal team, rather, for Jane Doe is actually going forth and arguing that this congressional act applies in her case because it was signed in law, like we said, in March of 2022. And she didn't file her lawsuit until December of 2022, and it became unsealed in June. But Scientology counters that it doesn't work that way. It doesn't apply to any allegations that took place in the 1990s, which is when she was forced, the assault happened, and she was forced to marry Gavin Potter. Okay. We're not sure which way Judge Broadbelt will go. It's kind of hard that the sickening allegations, like the allegations itself, are all just going to be based on dates, sensitive dates, an arbitration contract. Like, it's kind of disheartening to know that in the legal system, it doesn't really matter what happened to her as much as it does whether a contract for her to speak about it was legal or not. And it's kind of heartbreaking, and it's one of the evils. And yes, I said the word evil. I meant it. They put caps on that. It is one of the evil things that Scientology holds dear. Their total control of the situation by that contract. By, if you're a Scientologist, you're a Scientologist, and only Scientology rules apply. The rest of the world's rules, where that's beneath us. Scientology rules are what matters. And a lot of wrongdoing's been done. They don't care who they hurt. Look what happened in the Masterson trial. Some of the things that were done or abusive, the people that didn't even get to come forward into the court, that were putting their stories out of things that had been done to them, and when they went to complain about them, what they were told. What the church did then, the Church of Scientology, was add to it, increase the pain and suffering and torturous nature of the situation. It's horrible. They literally stripped them of all rights, dehumanized you. That's why I use the word evil. Anyway, this is going to tie into the next one. Okay. The hearing for whether or not religious arbitration is going to happen did happen recently, although the judge hasn't decided, and we're just waiting. Okay, because nothing can go forward in this case until the arbitration issue is resolved. Okay, so her complaints, just to show you that she also lists David Miscavige, Gavin Potter, a publications company, 6 to 100 inclusive defendant Does. Okay, but Religious Technology Center is listed in this one, also in the Church of Scientology International. We both know that David Miscavige is the CEO and the head of all of those. The actual causation complaint is negligence, sexual assault, sexual battery, negligent supervision, and failure to warn. She was a child. She was 16. They forced her into marriage at an illegal age in California. Negligent employment retention. She was part of Sea Org, and they threatened her. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud. Now, that's a big one. They're saying that those contracts and what they did to her is fraud. Public nuisance in public injunction. We'll see. A lot of this still stands. Nothing's been stricken yet because arbitration is more important before they start writing. It's just that they cannot actually put forward, to, suppress or to strike or to cancel anything that comes forward in any of this until this arbitration issue is actually resolved. All right, I'm going to take wrong one removed, and just to see it, the chat isn't frozen, just nobody's talking. It's and that's fine. And I've got one more to go. I know this is long. I'm gonna bring you up to speed on Bixler the best that I can quickly, because I don't want to go, past 2 hours for you guys. Okay. The Bixler is the big one here. This one's been around since 2019. All right. Now, this complaint was filed in 2019. It is Chrissy Carnell Bixler, who was Jane Doe number 3 in the Masterson trial. It's her husband, Cedric Bixler Zavala, Jane Doe 1, Marie Bobette Riles in Jane Doe 2. We heard from all of them in the Masterson trial. And we heard the harassment. We heard some of the harassment that was going on. And this civil suit was stayed at the time of the Masterson trial. All right. The defendants of this are the Church of Scientology International, the Religious Technical Center, the Church of Scientology Celebrity Center International. First time we've seen the Celebrity Center put in here, because, Chrissy Bixler will rightly point out that the coveting of celebrities and putting them in this situation like this, they had responsibility for Danny Masterson. Okay. Everything in where he conducted everything through the Celebrity Center. Okay, that was the protection that he had. And so they're named in here. This is where a lot of the harassment and protocols came from. They also list David Miscavige himself and Daniel Masterson. Okay, and Daniel Masterson, just as a note here, I didn't put a bullet, but Daniel Masterson, after he was convicted, and the jury said guilty, and he was sentenced to his 30 years. While he's appealing, he filed a motion in this case to try to get this case stayed until his appeal was done. Because, Judge Oppinder Kalra, who in this case, Judge Oppinder, he very proactive. He's like, nope, that was denied. And that was denied because what else you got to do, Danny? You're sitting in prison. You can actually handle, your lawyers can handle this for you. There's no reason to stay this case. It doesn't have anything to do with whether that conviction exists or not. Okay, because the evidence that was put into the trial, whether you're guilty or not, is still evidence and a matter of record with the court. Okay, so appeal or not, He said no. He said no. Just like Judge Almeida said, oh, you want to get out on bail or while you appeal? No, your wife's divorcing you. You're going to run. Like, no, you can sit there. Like, there's no reason to let you out. Like, everybody appeals. Like, not everybody gets out of jail while they wait. Nope. Some reasonableness again, which was really good to see. This particular judge, and I actually have this judge. Oh, I did. What did I do with it? Here it is. Copy. This is information on this particular judge. He's very clever. He's so clever that Leah Remini made some quips and motions. She hasn't filed to the court yet, but she was like, well, if you want to get rid of Judge Raymond Hammond in my case, we could take Judge Alpender Carla, because doesn't it make sense since like all that harassment and everything happened? And I'll get to that because there's new allegations that just came forward. Oh gosh, it's like the news media been reporting on what happened during the Masterson trial as regards to harassment of the prosecutors and witnesses. And it's all been documented, and it's going to become part of Leah Remini's case, and it's going to be amended, they're hoping, into this case also. But that's why Leah Remini says, since the cases are going to have similar elements here in regards to events and issues, why not use the same judge? It makes sense. Then he doesn't have to hear the stuff 2, 3, 4 times. You know, he's fully aware of everything that's going on. That makes sense. But you know, Scientology is not going to go for that, because of the rulings that are happening here. First of all, they've done everything they can since the Masterson trial has come to a conclusion to get this case tossed. All during, they even filed a motion recently that said that because the case was filed in 2019, too much time has passed. It's 5 years old. You got to toss this out, Judge. It's ridiculous to wait that long for anything to happen. But this judge is pretty clever. He's like, no, I'm sorry, because the case was stayed. You know what stayed means, right? That means because you had another case going. And by the way, this is a picture of Chrissy Bixler. We often say, like, who is Chrissy? Like, she's the one who came out with her name and everything, and I don't always have a face to provide. And this was a rather beautiful picture of her I wanted to put forward, to put a case to the lawsuit, because it's her dedication to keeping this lawsuit alive is to why it's still here. To do all the filings, to gather everything, to be the face of it. She's literally the face of this lawsuit, even though everybody else is involved. She literally is the one out there advocating to keep this thing going, and that what Scientology does to their members in regards to harassment in post when you leave Scientology, you know, through their, because she was a Scientologist who actually looked to Scientologists to help her. And she went to them to get help in regards to the assault. And what did she get? She got berated. She got abused. She got like turned away. So she left Scientology. And then what they do? They keep kicking at her. They harass her. She's documented everything. They had to get security on their house. Their dog was attacked. Their children are terrified with people peeking in their windows. They get assaulted. Their children get talked to at school. They had to get new alarm systems. Her emails were compromised. Her phones have been tapped. All of their electronic devices repeatedly over the years. And they have documented it all. Okay. And so she's pretty much the face of it. And so I want to just give you a picture of her. Here is that actual case. And it goes back to 2019. It was filed in August of 2019. Okay, and we're going to get to the rest of that. Okay, so this one actually has a trial date of September 22nd of 2025, because that judge, Calra said, nope, sorry, Scientology, you don't get to say anything about timely filing and this and that, because we stayed the case. We stayed the case because you asked us to stay the case. Danny Masterson didn't want this case going on while he was on trial. Scientology didn't want this case going on while he was on trial. And everybody agreed to hold the proceedings until after. And then it came back well within time after the Masterson trial was finished. Okay. So that motion to dismiss was tossed. Okay. But we've got Miscavige service issues. Okay. But this guy also is just like, you know, It's quite obvious what they're doing, but we have to find a way to actually get this service agreed with. Okay. All right. There's a lot of new reporting coming forward on the Masterson trial interference by Scientology. Remember Vicky Probeski? Remember the previous defendant's attorneys giving all the discovery to a Scientology attorney who then tried to file complaints against the LAPD, witnesses, and everybody else? Interference. Real major interference, and it's documented. And Judge Almeida actually put in an order in the judgment on it during the Masterson trial that they had violated the dissemination order, the previous attorneys, by giving them in. She had no right to it, the information that she was given. Okay, and now they're actually adding this in this case. In the Bixler case, they actually want to come forward and give new filing to amended complaint that would include racketeering. Yes, racketeering, to call Scientology a racketeering enterprise. That the way they harass and coerce and bully and do all of this while they are making money actually is a racketeering enterprise. They're acting like the mob. They have their own set of rules. They do what they want, and they don't recognize the rule of law in the country. They don't. They only recognize their own rule of law. Does that sound similar to a gang or an illegal organization like the mob? Racketeering. Okay? You can't conspire to do all this against people, against the law. So they want to amend it to include that. And also to add an additional victim to the case. Instead of just Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3 in the husband and Miss Reales, they want to add Trisha Vesey, who also testified in the Masterson trial and has documented her incident formally through the court system. Okay, when Judge Calro heard the complaint, and that's the proposed amendments that I'm putting out, the link there, the amended complaint, which would include all of this. And the reason that I put it out there, interesting for you to read, is there's some language in there as to why Scientology should be considered a racketeering type enterprise that are very compelling. Number one, I hope that there's a lot of legal precedents to actually go for it. They did cite a lot of cases there that really seems to hone in on it. But this would be the first time that Scientology has been called to task for what they actually do, for what they're actually doing. They are not a religious organization doing good for the world. They are making money off the suffering of others, racketeering to get their way. They are bullying, cajoling, harassing, threatening, interfering with people's contracts. Do what I say, or this is what happens to you. You're either part of Scientology or you're not. It would be the first time. Should Judge Calro actually allow this amended charges to go through, and should this go to when it goes to trial in September of next year? That would be very interesting. And gosh, I wish that we would be able to watch that one. Because damn, that was going to set some precedent. That is going to actually turn every other Scientology lawsuit on its ear. Okay. Well, during a recent hearing that we had, it was just last week, the beginning of the week, Judge Carter heard the arguments in regards to it, but he wanted to think on it, and he actually needed to continue the hearing for more questions and more information to be presented to May of 29th, next month, at the end of next month. So we're not going to know if this amended complaint actually gets to go through. So the copy that I'm giving you is the proposed one that has been submitted to the court for preview and for his permission to actually have it filed. And that's what the hearings are about. Because, of course, Scientology gets to oppose it. And they are. You know they are. But how do you oppose being that organized? Like, everything that they do kind of supports the racketeering. How are they going to say they don't do what they do? Do you accept anybody in? No. No. Just the questions alone, like my mind races. It just races with what could actually happen if this actually goes forward, or what is definitely going to change the outlook on all of the other cases. So just as a review for this actual complaint for damages, the complainants, as I told you before, we listed them all out, but they do want to add, Miss Vesey. They want to add another complainant, but they're going against the Church of Scientology International, again, the Religious Technology Center, which was not excluded from this one either, Church of Scientology Celebrity Center, and David Miscavige, Daniel Masterson, Doe's 1 to 25, for stalking in violation of California Code, physical invasion of privacy in violation of California Code, constructive invasion of privacy in violation, intentional infliction of emotional distress and loss of consortium. That's between the husband and the wife, based on what happened after they acknowledged that she was assaulted and what Scientology actually did to her. So they say, okay, I'm going to. This is actually one of the only good pictures I've seen of the Celebrity Center in California. This is the Celebrity Center. And I don't know, it's big, but I don't know why. I just expected something fancier, like a grand hotel. I don't know. Well, definitely Celebrity Center is listed in this actual case also. So I'm going to go through the chat again, and I'm sorry I haven't been like chatting with you guys. It's a lot of information to get out with these 3 cases. Everybody appeals. I've been told I'm not appealing. I wouldn't say so, Mark. I would say you're quite humorous and intelligent, and I would say that amounts to very appealing. So, I mean, but this is just my humble opinion, Well, in lawsuits, I mean, it's almost standard, especially in, murder cases, it's almost standard. And in death penalty cases, there's an automatic appeal. Well, of course, if you lose a judgment, you're not very happy, you're going to appeal, Everybody tries to appeal is what I should have said. Everybody attempts the appeal, okay? Jin says it sounds very familiar. Which part? It is just mind-boggling stupidity on the Church of Scientology side in their attitude, I would say. And it definitely is. But I have to say they're quite tenacious. I have to admire. They don't give up. And they really put their money into their beliefs. They pay a lot of money on these attorneys and stuff. And like, you're a Scientology attorney, you're pretty damn busy. There's a lot of filing. Thank you for that comment about my voice, Mark. That would also go to stroking the bear if you guys are playing bingo. Yeah. That is a nice thing to say, though. Thank you. The trial date is a week from your birthday. You're a September baby. I have so many Virgos in my family, and Virgo people around me, like late August into September, into mid-September. Everyone in my family's birthday is except for me. I'm in the spring. Everybody else is like summer and fall. Oh, you too, Grace? You have a lot of people at the same time? Well, birthday parties in the Scientology case. That's what we have. Rocket, that's my mom. Oh, you have the same birthday as my mom. Oh. That's a nice segue. You just made me like smile thinking about my mom. How does that picture remind me of a jail in Disneyland? Exactly. That Rocket, when I saw like the fire escape on the outside and the horrible color of it and everything like that. And I'm thinking, and then I see those like the turrets at the top, and I'm like, this is like a failed attempt at trying to make it a happy Disney place. It just looks it looks like a prison. It does. It doesn't look fancy at all, and that's the Celebrity Center. Like, I was surprised. I was. just goes to show that religion is all about the money. In most organized religions, I do agree. There's some religions it is a bit like that. Yes, I agree, Mark. It's kind of sad. Like you see these these preachers that come out there and they're just always putting out the pay, the donation thing and this and that. And the same thing with Scientology. They raise all this money and then they try to they really do try to get to the person who wants to make a difference in this world or find a purpose. And they say how you're going to save the planet and you're going to do good. And there's going to be education, this, and we're going to, put drinking water here. And we're going to do better food supplies over in this country. And we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to clear the planet. And so you think like you're doing something good. Very similar to NXIVM. Allison Mack got involved with NXIVM because he wanted to do good for women, make them strong, independent, have some change in the world. And he put her in charge of an organization that was supposed to do that. It turned into a sex cult. Numbed their minds, depleted their bodies, starved them of food. Crazy. But how did they get to them? The appeal of being able to do something of the wrongs they see in the world. Because, we all feel that, right? Occasionally. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. Scientology tries to answer that for individuals. What do you mean there's nothing you can do about it? We can do something about it together. This big multi-international organization who is making a lot of money and who Davis Miscavige is actually benefiting from all of that money. And one of the judges in the cases was right to say, how can you separate yourself from this individually when you run it? 3 of your other organizations are listed here in black and white, and you are the CEO and administrator of all of that. Like, it's all on you, Dave. It's like the judge said, yo, Dave, thought you were the head cheese. Like, head cheese doesn't get to call foul and leave the room when they get caught doing something. Like, come on. Basically just said you need to do the right thing. You need to stand up to your charges. You stop playing these games and just accept service. Get your body in here and answer these motions. Like, yeah, it's amusing. And head of your military branch. Oh, yeah. I'm not sure what that means, Grace. I'm thinking you mean the Religious Technical Center, which is like the military part of it, based on what Mike Rinder and Claire Headley had said goes on there in the policies that are, it is like the enforcements, Oh, the Sea Org. Yes, the Sea Org is like the military part. Yeah. And, the Jane Doe one case really sticks on the Sea Org. Okay. And Leah Remini and Bixler are really sticking on the, Religious Technical Center in the Celebrity Center. As far as where the rulings came down and the people where they went to, like, be told what's what, and that they weren't really complying and stuff. But the Sea Org, yeah. And Jane Doe was there. She worked there all since she was a child. Well, if there's not any more questions, I'm going to be wrapping up in a minute or two. I thank you for staying with me so long on this one. There's been a lot going on, as you can see, with all of the cases. Been tracking it the best that I can and keeping you up to date. But as soon as these other hearings happen, we'll start actually putting these in, periodically, a little more often. I've been doing them every 3-4 months, as the cases roll back. Some of them were stayed for quite a while. Leah Remini's, just started getting going right after the Daniel Masterson trial. Well, these new charges in regards to prosecution and harassment, I did not know that was going on during the Masterson case in regards to a prosecutor who was followed, whose home was broken into, and believes that his phone was tapped. There are no accusations in regards to that. We did hear, we knew all about what happened because Judge Almeida brought it to light during the trial about the prosecution getting a link that Vicky Probreski, an attorney for Scientology, who was not named on that case, okay? Danny Masterson was on trial, not Scientology. But Scientology was there every day, remember? Vicky Proveski or one of her people from her firm were there almost every day. And there was actually some complaints by the Jane Does that they were being intimidated by the looks and the comments and things like that. Okay. But what's really important is that they had access to the discovery and they're not a party in the case. That's a problem. And the previous attorneys, Applebaum and Meserov, had the answer for that with Judge Almeida. And she called them to task on that. Unfortunately, the contempt of court in violating a judge's order in this country, the fines are just not stiff enough. I think what they get, $500 or $5,000 fine, no complaint to the law board for the board, they should go up against their board. They should actually have to answer a complaint on whether they should still be lawyering. That's serious. I mean, everybody knows you don't share information in a case. It's just crazy. I mean, I'm a little disappointed. I mean, there's been several contempt of court things lately. Michelle Troconis, for one of them, who was absolutely violated 2 court orders right there in court, in front of everybody, video evidence of it, and the most she'll get is 6 months and $500 fine. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, And above that, there's another lawyer who worked with Fotis Fotis's attorney is actually also facing contempt charges in that for giving false statement and an alibi when he didn't really act it, for involving himself in obstruction. And we're going to see what happens with him too, and whether or not he will face anything with his legal board. Because when a lawyer does it, it's like, I mean, I can see a layperson like maybe not understanding and just trying to get away with something, but a lawyer, shouldn't they know better? Am I wrong? Like, I don't mean to get soapboxy, but I am wrong on that. How long before Scientology tries to start its own country to avoid rules applying to, if there was an island or a country they could buy, I'm sure they would do it, because they are having some trouble internationally. People are, different countries, all over. I have to gather the list for you guys, but they're starting to say, you're not really a religion. You're kind of like a cult. Some of them have actually come out and labeled them as a cult, so they don't have the same rights. And they're losing their tax-free status in many places, or it's being amended appropriately, and they're requiring more public, Yep. That is what I said, Mark. Yes. The unintentional innuendo. I am so guilty of that. Almost, I would say daily, repeatedly. The unintentional innuendo. Okay. And Grace says, Kyle, that's why L. Ron Hubbard lived on a boat with the Sea Org for a while. Yes, it is. He was very unhappy about all those laws. And I think if he could actually just have a fleet of yachts to run Scientology on, I mean, that's the way they would have won. I think so. You're right, Grace. Like, he just abandoned the world for Sea Org. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then following up on that, how long before the Geneva Convention comes up? There's a good question. Is this it? The unintenuendo. What a great name for that. The unintenuendo. I like it. I like it. That was in my message to you. I am so guilty of that. And I have no problem with those being bingo squares. Like when I mispronounce something, or, because I'm terrible with the names sometimes. I really am, and I get it. Like, I just wander up here. I'm just a woman named Bear who wears cat ears and has a mic. Okay. I don't profess to be a lawyer, a legal professional. I'm not a professional anything when I'm out here on YouTube, except for human. I am human. They see it. And so I mispronounce things, I flounder and I bluff, but I do the best that I can to get you the facts about these cases in a kind of a straightforward way, sometimes with a little humor because, stuff bugs me, and sometimes with a lot of opinion because, I have a mic and I like to talk and I got opinions, lots of them. And I like this stuff, looking at it from these different angles. In these 3 cases in particular, even though they all have Scientology in common, each one is, as you saw, hopefully, in how I presented the information. Each one has its own thing legally that it has to overcome in regards to the law, and some precedent in regards to how we deal with Scientology in the future could be accomplished here, which is why I want to keep following these three. Okay, because there is actually going to be some legal precedents. I feel I can kind of see it. There's hope in the reactions to the judge, in the judge's statements and reactions, and in the rulings, in the new motions coming forward, in the relentlessness and tenacity of the people filing the suits to not give up. They're not going to buckle under the thousands of pages that Scientology keeps throwing at the court. It's time for some accountability. And that's why I'm following it, because I'm hoping we see it. I hope we do. I have not made any bones about my opinion about Scientology. Everybody who follows my channel knows that I do believe they're a cult, and I do believe they're a dangerous one. And that's my opinion on it. But legally, like, that doesn't come into court, right? Like, that doesn't come into the information that I'm giving you here. I'm giving you the facts and giving you the cases, and you can decide for yourselves, But I do hope that we see some accountability going forward. And I think that we've got a selection of judges here, very different, all of them. Very different, all of them. But between Calra and Hammond, we have actually seen the words common sense be thrown around, and ridiculous. And then, come on, like, you're really not going for that, are you? Like, Scientology's been putting on notice, okay? It doesn't often happen in the LA court system. There's long been rumors that LA is compromised, especially in the police department, in the court system, in regards to Scientology, that they have people everywhere that are going to just go their way. But let's hope that, that comes up in the racketeering amendment, if that actually goes forward. Wouldn't that be something to see? I mean, already they're mentioning that they want to talk about how the Scientology attorney Provodetsky, once she got that evidence on who would be testifying for the LA Police Department on what happened, she went in and filed complaints about them. She met with the chief. Yes, she did. And pulled her Scientology weight to try to get them not to testify in a criminal trial. That's entitlement. That's going too far. That's influence peddling. That might also be akin to bribery, blackmail, definitely harassment and undue influence, Well, anyway, let's see what happens. Let's see. It's common knowledge that you mean that they're a cult and a dangerous one, Mark? Yeah. I just want to be clear that that's where I stand on it. Extortion. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Rocket Couch. Extortion. Like, I want to see, like, those kind of charges. Yep. Yeah. But this is things we could look forward to. Will it happen? Who knows? But that's what piqued my interest, and hopefully, it adds in your interest too. But again, I thank you very much for listening to me for almost 2 hours. I'm going to cut it before I hit the 2-hour mark in the next minute. I'll give you a minute to wrap up with questions. Did anybody get a bingo by any chance? I mean, this was a serious one, so maybe not. It would be harder to get it, I think, in one of these types of streams. But there's still a possibility if you played. And if you play later, you just need to write the stream. You're a member, you want to participate, and you get a bingo, and you want to be part of the contest. Just send me the copy of your card where the bingo was in the date of the stream, and you'll get entered. And everybody else, you can play all along, like, even if you don't enter the contest. The link is going to stay up there, and you can play that to any of the streams. But that one's the true crime and legal update. Is a little specific. You got a few bingos, Rocket Couch, or a few squares? I'm not clear on that. This also really gets me, Grace. The child trafficking and child endangerment, the way they separate the children from their parents. It's so young, 10 years old, they're working. From the reporting that I've seen, like 10-hour days, endangerment, the things that they're exposed to. What happens to these young women? Okay. Gavin Potter there are articles all over the place. He's a notorious recruiter for them, and it's always for young women. He's always young women, grooming, very popular, bringing young women into the organization and getting them to sign on for Sea Org and other parts throughout Scientology, you know. Thank you, Mark. You know, that's kind of nice. You're not here to play bingo. You'll just hear from my voice. Oh, so I guess it doesn't really, you should tell me what kind of content you would like to hear. Like if there's conversations that you would like to hear. You like my voice so much. I'm always looking for interesting conversations to put out for library chats and other things, I do a lot of true crime because it's one of my passions, reading the legal documents every day. I do like to keep up on this interesting part of it, but I do like to do other things too. As you guys know, on the weekends with my much more casual conversations that we have, just talking about anything. But I do like to actually stick to a subject occasionally. True. Oh, you got a few bingos, Rocky Couch. Congratulations. Oh, there you go. Oh, making them. I didn't know that they made the children work as auditors, Grace. Hearing more than they're ready to hear. Exactly. This is not good. Oh, it's horrible. I'm glad that you enjoy Rocket Couch. And I so am appreciative of you putting that all together. I think it's a fantastic idea. You're getting a lot of positive feedback, and I hope everybody enjoys it. But on that, I would say good night to everyone. Real briefly, they did seat the Chad Daybell jury today, and I will be back Wednesday with live trial coverage and opening statements on Wednesday morning. However, I am coming back tomorrow night with a couple of little things, just a couple of little things, little updates like we did yesterday, boom, 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 what's going on. Because I think that's a good way that we can actually keep up to date on some of the stuff, not let it get too far ahead of us while the trial's going on. Okay. Oh, thank you, Mipit. It's good to see you. I know you're listening in the background all the time, but I do love to see your little hearts in the chat. Oh, Grace, I welcome the channel. Thank you. I do like getting extra information from lots of different places, and I appreciate your help in the past. You did let me know about that Danny Masterson thing when they were saying he was getting attacked and threatened and stuff, and they sent me on a rabbit hole, sent me down a rabbit hole, but it was well worth it, and I appreciate the heads up on all of that. You did save me some time, and I'm appreciative. All right. On that, everyone, I'm going to put on that outro, and I'm going to get out of here. You guys all enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll more than likely see you tomorrow night again.